Okay, so have you ever noticed that like little flicker of I don't know, satisfaction maybe when like someone you're competing with hits a rough patch?
Yeah, definitely. I know exactly what you mean. Like when a rival business has a bad quarter or a team
Yeah.
you just can't stand loses a big game.
Exactly. It's kind of like this weird secret pleasure almost. And that's what we're going to dive into today. It's called Schadenfreude.
It is, and it's more common than you might think,
Mhm.
especially in the competitive world we live in, whether it's business, sports, or even just those everyday rivalries we all have.
Right. And you know what's interesting is that understanding Schadenfreude can actually be pretty helpful. I mean, it can help us figure out how markets react, why groups behave the way they do, and even how to make smarter decisions when we're up against someone else.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going to be drawing on a lot of research on Schadenfreude and competition, specifically in the realm of e-commerce psychology. It's a fascinating area with a lot of insights into how people think and act in the marketplace.
This podcast is powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free. So, Schadenfreude, kind of a mouthful of a word, right? And it's not exactly the most pleasant emotion to admit to. So, what exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's definitely not something we brag about, but it's a very real human emotion.
Yeah.
So Schadenfreude, it's a German word, literally translates to pleasure taken in someone else's trouble. And while it might sound a bit harsh on the surface, it's actually a pretty complex emotion with a long history. Philosophers have been debating it for centuries, and in modern psychology, it's a major area of research.
So it's not just like a fleeting guilty pleasure then. And
Hmm.
like we were saying, it seems to come up a lot in competitive situations, right? Like when your team crushes their arch rival, there's that extra layer of satisfaction because, they lost.
Exactly. And psychologists have identified a few key drivers of Schadenfreude that help explain why we feel this way. One is what's called aggression-based Schadenfreude.
Aggression based. So it's like rooted in some kind of anger.
Well, not necessarily anger exactly,
Yep.
but it does stem from that us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
You know, when we strongly identify with a group, whether it's our company, our sports team, or even just our circle of friends, we sometimes see those outside the group as rivals or even threats. And so when someone in that outgroup messes up or fails, it can feel like a win for our side, which triggers that sense of pleasure.
Ah, I see. It's like our tribe is doing better because the other tribe is doing worse.
Okay.
Okay, so that's aggression based. What's the next type?
The second one is rivalry-based Schadenfreude. This one is a bit more straightforward. It's all about direct competition. Two businesses fighting for the same customers, two athletes vying for the same gold medal. When your direct competitor stumbles, it's natural to feel a bit of satisfaction because it can directly improve your own chances of success.
So it's less about group dynamics and more about that one-on-one competition where someone's loss is potentially your gain.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What's the third one?
The third type is justice-based Schadenfreude. This is that feeling you get when you see someone get what they deserve. Maybe they've been acting unethically or they have a reputation for being unfair. So when something bad happens to them, it feels like a form of cosmic justice, and that can bring about a sense of pleasure, almost like the universe is righting a wrong.
Yeah, like that whole karma thing. I think we've all felt that at some point, even if we don't like to admit it. And it's interesting how these three drivers, aggression, rivalry, and justice, can often overlap, especially in competitive environments.
Funnily, you might have a fierce rival who you also believe is engaging in shady business practices. So their downfall could trigger all three types of Schadenfreude at once.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that understanding these different reasons for Schadenfreude isn't just about knowing ourselves better. It can actually have some pretty big implications in the business world and in our personal lives. Well, from a business perspective, think about it. If you understand why people feel good when a competitor stumbles, it can help you understand how markets react. For example, if a big brand has a major product recall, you can bet that consumers who buy from their rivals are going to feel a little boost in their own brand loyalty. So those rival brands can actually anticipate shifts in customer sentiment and even gain market share because of it.
Interesting. So competitors' misfortune can actually be a business opportunity for others. And what about in our personal lives? How does understanding Schadenfreude help us there?
Socially speaking, being aware of this emotion can help us build better relationships with others. When we understand the triggers for Schadenfreude, we can start to recognize it in ourselves and in those around us. And that can help us avoid unnecessary conflict or even work to reduce harmful rivalries.
So it's about being more mindful of these emotions and how they can affect our interactions with others.
Got it. Okay, so we've defined Schadenfreude and looked at the reasons behind it. Let's dig into the psychology of it a bit more. What are some of the key psychological concepts that help explain this emotion? One of the big ones is social comparison theory. This basically says that we're always comparing ourselves to others, whether we realize it or not. We look at people who are doing better than us. That's called upward comparison. And we look at people who are doing worse than us, downward comparison. And these comparisons can really influence how we feel about ourselves.
So how does this relate to Schadenfreude?
Well, when someone we see as a competitor experiences a setback, it can trigger that downward comparison in our minds.
Hmm.
Suddenly, we might feel a little better about our own situation because we're not the ones who messed up. And that sense of relative improvement can lead to those feelings of Schadenfreude.
Makes sense. It's like we're getting a little ego boost from someone else's misfortune. Are there any cultural differences in how this works?
Definitely. You know how open people are about comparing themselves to others can vary a lot across cultures. In some cultures, it's totally normal to talk about your accomplishments and compare yourself to others, while in others, it's seen as boastful or rude. So the way we express and even experience Schadenfreude can be influenced by cultural norms.
Interesting. So it's not just about the individual, it's about the social context as well.
No.
Okay, what about self-esteem? Does that play a role in how we experience Schadenfreude?
Absolutely. Research has shown that people with lower self-esteem tend to experience stronger feelings of Schadenfreude. It's kind of like a defense mechanism, you know? If you're feeling insecure about yourself, seeing someone else fail can make you feel a little bit better about your own situation. It's a temporary boost to your self-image.
So it's like you're putting someone else down to lift yourself up. It's not the healthiest way to cope, but I can see how it happens. Now, we talked about envy earlier. How does envy connect with Schadenfreude?
Envy is often a precursor to Schadenfreude. You know, when we envy someone, we feel pain or resentment because of their success, their possessions, or their status. And that envy can be pretty uncomfortable.
Mm.
Now, when that person we envy experiences a setback, it can actually provide relief from those negative feelings. Their misfortune kind of levels the playing field, and that relief can then manifest as pleasure Schadenfreude. It's like the envy transforms into a sort of twisted satisfaction.
So it's like a two-step process. Envy leads to pain, and then someone else's misfortune relieves that pain.
Fascinating. Now, you mentioned before that there's actual brain activity associated with Schadenfreude. What's going on in our brains when we feel this way?
This is where it gets really cool. Scientists have used brain imaging techniques like fMRI to study Schadenfreude. And what they found is that when people experience pleasure at someone else's misfortune, a part of the brain called the ventral striatum lights up. This is the same area that's associated with reward and pleasure from things like food, sex, and drugs.
Wow, so it's like our brains are actually wired to enjoy seeing other people fail in certain contexts.
In a way, yes. It's a reminder that emotions aren't just these abstract things. They have a real biological basis in our brains, and Schadenfreude is no different.
Okay, so we've got the ventral striatum lighting up.
Yeah.
What about hormones? Do hormones play a role in all this? You bet. And this is where it gets even more complex. You know that hormone oxytocin? It's often called the love hormone because it's associated with bonding and social connection. But research has shown that in competitive situations, oxytocin can actually increase feelings of Schadenfreude.
Wait, really? That's surprising.
Yeah.
So the same hormone that makes us feel love and connection can also make us feel happy when someone else fails.
Exactly. It seems that the effects of oxytocin depend a lot on the social context. When we're in a cooperative setting, it promotes pro-social behavior. But in a competitive setting, it can actually amplify our enjoyment of a rival's misfortune.
Wow, that's wild. So our brains and our hormones are both working together to create these complex emotional responses. And you also mentioned a pain-pleasure connection in the brain. What's that all about?
Yeah, this is another fascinating finding. When we see someone we dislike experiencing trouble, it can activate those reward centers in our brain even if we don't consciously want it to. There's also evidence that certain brain regions associated with envy might actually play a role in that switch from envy to pleasure when the person we envy experiences a setback.
So it's like envy can actually transform into a type of twisted pleasure when the target of that envy experiences misfortune.
That's one way to put it. It's a reminder that the human brain is incredibly complex, and our emotional responses are often a mix of different competing processes.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the brain and hormones. Now let's think about the different kinds of competition we encounter. How does the nature of the competition itself affect whether or not we experience Schadenfreude?
The type of competition definitely plays a big role. For example, in direct zero-sum competitions, like a lot of sports, there's one clear winner and one clear loser. So your success is directly tied to your opponent's failure. And that can really intensify feelings of Schadenfreude because there's such a stark contrast between winning and losing.
Yeah, it's like your joy is amplified by their pain. What about other types of competition, like those based on status or prestige, maybe in a workplace setting?
In those situations, people are often competing for things like recognition promotions or social standing. And when someone who holds a high status position makes a mistake or experiences a setback, those who felt threatened or overshadowed by them might secretly feel a sense of satisfaction. It's almost like a rebalancing of power.
Like the playing field has been leveled a bit. And what about in consumer markets, where brands are competing for customers? How does Schadenfreude show up there?
Brand loyalty is a great example. If you're a diehard fan of a particular brand, you might feel a little bit of glee when a competing brand has a problem, like a product recall or a negative news story. It's like your own brand loyalty is reinforced by the competitor's failure.
Right, it's like you made the right choice and they made the wrong one. And that feels good. Okay, so it's not just about individual competition, it's about the brands we choose and how they perform relative to each other. Now, let's talk about group identity. How does our sense of belonging to a group affect how we experience Schadenfreude?
Our group identity is a huge factor in all this.
Mm.
We tend to feel much stronger Schadenfreude towards people who are part of an outgroup compared to those within our own group. And this is especially true if we perceive the outgroup as a threat or if we hold negative stereotypes about them.
So it's back to that us versus them mentality again.
Exactly. And a great example of this is sports fandom. Those intense rivalries between teams. Fans get so invested in their team's success that they often take real pleasure in the failures of their rivals, even if it doesn't directly benefit their own team.
Yeah, it's like a collective win for the fans when the rival team loses. And there's actually some brain imaging research that supports this. They've shown that fans experience a reward response in their brains when a rival team fails.
That's right. It really shows how powerful group identity can be in shaping our emotions. What about in the workplace?
Yeah. How does this group dynamic play out among coworkers?
Well, in a competitive work environment where people are vying for promotions or recognition, it's not uncommon for someone to feel a little bit happy when a coworker they see as competition messes up. But this kind of dynamic can be really toxic for a team. It can lead to gossip, backstabbing, and a general lack of trust.
So while some level of competition can be healthy when it crosses the line into taking pleasure in a colleague's misfortune, it can really damage the team dynamic.
Okay, so we've talked about group factors. Now, what about individual factors? Are there certain personality traits that might make someone more prone to experiencing Schadenfreude?
Yes, certain personality traits have been linked to higher levels of Schadenfreude. For instance, people who score high on what's called the dark triad of personality traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, tend to experience more Schadenfreude. This might be because they have lower levels of empathy or they tend to be more manipulative and self-serving. So people who are more selfish and less concerned with the well-being of others might be more likely to enjoy seeing others fail. What about gender and cultural differences? Are there any patterns there?
Research has found some gender differences in terms of what triggers Schadenfreude and how openly it's expressed, but the findings aren't always consistent. And culture definitely plays a big role. In some cultures, competitiveness is encouraged, and expressing Schadenfreude might be more socially acceptable, while in other cultures, it's seen as rude or inappropriate.
Right, so the way we express and even experience this emotion can vary depending on our cultural background. And what about developmentally? Does Schadenfreude change as we age?
Interestingly, even very young children show signs of Schadenfreude, although it's probably not as complex as what adults experience. During adolescence, as we become more aware of social hierarchies and engage in more intense social comparisons, feelings of envy and rivalry can increase, which might lead to more Schadenfreude. And as we get older, we may develop more sophisticated ways of managing these emotions, but the capacity for Schadenfreude probably never fully goes away.
So it's a feeling that stays with us throughout life in some form or another. Okay, we've talked about what can trigger Schadenfreude. Now let's flip the script. What are some things that might actually lessen or moderate this feeling?
One big factor is deservingness. If we believe that someone's negative experience is justified, maybe they cheated or they were rude, then we're more likely to feel Schadenfreude and less likely to feel guilty about it. It's like our sense of justice makes the pleasure more acceptable.
Right, it's like we're morally okay with enjoying their misfortune because they had it coming. What about the status or competence of the person experiencing the setback? Does that matter?
It can. Sometimes when someone who's seen as very high status or exceptionally competent makes a mistake, the Schadenfreude response might be stronger, almost like people want to see them taken down a peg. But if someone has already experienced a significant loss of status, that Schadenfreude might be less intense because it's like they've already been humbled.
Interesting. So it's almost like the universe has already balanced the scales. What about our relationship with the person? Does that affect how much Schadenfreude we feel?
Definitely. We're much less likely to feel Schadenfreude towards people we're close to, like our friends and family.
Mm.
Unless, of course, there's a strong element of rivalry within that relationship, like siblings competing. The more distant or anonymous someone is, the easier it is to take pleasure in their misfortune.
That makes sense. It's hard to be happy when someone you care about is struggling, and the anonymity of the internet probably doesn't help either. It's easier to feel Schadenfreude towards strangers online because we don't have that personal connection.
That's a great point. The distance and anonymity of online interactions can definitely make it easier for these kinds of negative emotions to surface. Now let's bring it back to e-commerce. How does all this knowledge about Schadenfreude play out in consumer behavior and the marketplace?
Right. Let's connect this back to our listeners who are interested in the psychology of online business.
One key area is brand rivalry. Consumers who strongly identify with a particular brand can actually enjoy seeing a competing brand experience negative events like product recalls, public scandals, or bad press. It reinforces their own brand loyalty and makes them feel like they made the right choice.
So it's not just about liking your own brand, it's also about disliking the competition. And that can actually translate into real business outcomes.
Exactly. Research suggests that when a rival brand fails, it can actually boost customer satisfaction with their own purchases from a different brand. It's like the competitor's misfortune validates their own decision. And this increased satisfaction can lead to more repeat purchases and stronger brand loyalty.
So a competitor's loss can actually be a win for other brands in terms of customer loyalty. Now, it sounds like some marketers might be tempted to exploit this tendency. How should businesses think about using this knowledge ethically?
It's a really important point. While this consumer behavior exists, ethical marketers need to tread carefully. Trying to explicitly capitalize on a competitor's misfortune through negative or overly aggressive advertising can really backfire. Consumers often see through those tactics, and it can damage a brand's reputation.
Yeah, it comes across as mean-spirited and can actually hurt your brand more than it helps.
Exactly. The best approach is to focus on highlighting your own brand's strengths and building genuine connections with your customers. Don't try to win by tearing others down. Focus on lifting yourself up instead.
Solid advice. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from defining Schadenfreude and understanding its psychological roots to exploring its impact on competition and consumer behavior. It's clearly a complex and multifaceted emotion.
It really is. And we've seen that it's influenced by everything from our brain chemistry and hormones to our group affiliations and even our personal values and beliefs.
And it's something that we encounter all the time in different areas of our lives, from our personal relationships to our professional endeavors and even our interactions as consumers.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for our listeners. As we navigate this increasingly competitive world, it's important to be mindful of these feelings both in ourselves and in others. How can we strive for success and achievement without taking unhealthy pleasure in the misfortunes of those around us? It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. A little bit of self-awareness and empathy can go a long way. This podcast is powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.